Hello, this is part 3 of my boat building project. You can see the previous parts in a playlist in my YouTube channel, and you can also see the version with pictures and written words at xrobots.co.uk/boat. So last time, or in fact in part 1, I made this piece of fiberglass, which is expanded polystyrene wrapped in fiberglass, and that's going to form the structure for the frame of the boat. So look back for that video of part 1. Basically, I put this on a wooden block at each end, stood in the middle, and it's quite strong and springy. Obviously, polystyrene you can shape with pretty much any tools. You can use a bread knife if you like, and the polystyrene you just need a paintbrush to lay it up. Also prime the piece with PVA so the polyester resin didn't melt the fiberglass. But essentially, all the tools you need are a bread knife and a paintbrush. So that's going to make construction very easy. Today I'm actually going to do the frame up in this video, so I'll be making the frame out of polystyrene. First of all, I'm just going to explain roughly what the plan is. So, basically my restrictions on size for making a boat are that it has to be roughly 1.5 meters wide, the hull depth can only be 1 meter deep, and the whole thing can only be just under 2.5 meters long. And the reason for that is a practical one, which is because otherwise it won't fit in my shed door. It won't fit in the shed and I won't be able to manoeuvre it around to actually do the fiberglassing. So I'm going to build the frame in my lounge, and then I'm going to take it outside to do the fiberglassing, because that really needs to be done in a place that's not your house, because polyester resin stinks. So for practical reasons there's a size restriction, so I can actually get it into a dry place outside to do it. So the basic plan is to build a fairly conventional shaped boat with a point at one end and a flat at the bottom. So this is basically a test, it's an experimental build. And after that I'm then going to build another hull that's much the same length but much thinner, and I'm going to turn this into a catamaran for stability. First of all we're going to concentrate on this one, and the second part will be building the smaller one once we've actually floated this boat in its own right and checked that it's stable in the water and so on. The reason for making a catamaran is for several reasons. First of all, I'd quite like to go on to build a sail for it, and if I do that I'll be putting the mast here, which will give it more stability without a deep keel. And the other one is I want to experiment with alternative propulsion methods. So basically most boats are driven by an outboard or an engine in the boat with a traditional propeller, but I quite like to experiment with something a bit like a paddle steamer. So traditionally with a paddle steamer there's a thing that turns around with paddles on it. The problem with that is that basically as soon as the paddle enters the water it's exiting again because it's going round and round. So what I quite like to do is build something more like tank tracks, where a belt goes all the way round and the paddles are fixed onto it, which means that the paddle's in the water for a much longer time and can also run pretty much the entire length of the boat. But in order to do that I need a moving channel of water, so either I'd have to put tank tracks like this on each side of a traditional boat, but in this case I can put that mechanism in the middle and there's a moving channel of water. Okay, so the frame of the boat itself, as I say, is going to be built out of expanded polystyrene. So the plan is to make formers, which are kind of this shape, with some holes cut through them, which means that I will wrap fiberglass through there, which means if we look through the top view, it means that basically I've got a tie for the fiberglass that's wrapped around through the middle, which gives it extra structural strength. Mainly the polystyrene is there as a former and the fiberglass is what gives it its strength, which will obviously be in box sections. And then from the top view, so we'll probably have some of these, and then we'll be running long bits of polystyrene all the way around that meet at the front on the outside of those, which make up the shape of the boat. So this former will be a sort of round shape, this one will be a round shape, this one will be slightly more pointy, and then obviously at the front there's just the pieces meeting, but basically this makes the boat sharper towards the front, so it makes it a traditional boat shape, so it cuts through the water. So with each of these, the long beams that go all the way to the front will be polystyrene. It's quite flexible, so I can just use straight pieces and bend them around the contour. So I will have one in the bottom that makes effectively where the keel would be, and at least 2 others on each side. And these are going to stand out from this solid piece that makes up the former. And the next phase after that will be stretching fabric over the whole thing and then soaking that in polyester resin so it goes rigid, and then backing it up on the inside with fiberglass. So that'll make the actual skin of the hull, which will all be supported by these box sections of fiberglass. And the reason for putting these formals on the outside of this one as opposed to the inside is because due to the curvature of the boat, as I stretch fabric over this, it's going to bow slightly inwards. But that means that these channels run the length of the boat rather than running around the circumference of it. So that means it will cut through the water better. So alternatively, you could look to cut notches out of this to fit them into. But that means the fabric is stretched around this, which means that basically it's going to bow inwards like this. Which means the boat's going to be a funny shape, and that's going to cause friction in the water. And that's why I'll be doing it with these pieces running lengthways on the outside of the formers that run this way. So I've got these sheets of polystyrene that I've just gone and bought from the local DIY store. Basically it's insulation foam. These are 50 mil thick, which is just over 2 inches. Or is it 3 inches? It's about 2 inches. They are 60 centimetres wide, which is about 2 feet, and 2.4 metres long, which is basically going to be the length of the boat. So basically that's sort of like the side profile. So on here I'm going to cut out the profile of the boat. It might be slightly deeper than that. But that's the first plan, and then do basically the cross brace sections as I previously discussed. So I'm going to draw on that with a marker and then cut it out with a bread knife. So I put this piece of polystyrene, which I've marked out, in the shed. As you can see, there's not that much space in here, which is why I'm not making this any bigger. I'm actually going to cut this with a jigsaw, although obviously polystyrene's really easy to cut. You could use a kitchen knife or any other type of saw. So let me get going, and we're going to just cut this contour out along both these green lines. That will form effectively the bottom side profile of the boat. Obviously this is making an absolute mess of polystyrene bits, which are all over me and everything. Which is why I'm doing this outside, and I've got my shop vac so I can regularly clean them up. There it is, so that's the first piece cut out. So now I just need to plot out the other pieces and get on with cutting them out and sticking them together. So you can see roughly what's happening here. I've got the keel along the middle there, which we cut out. I've added a little bit to the back. This needs to shift forward slightly, so that sits on there. And I've got my 3 cross sections in there, and then I've got long pieces around the side, which are flexed around the contour of the boat. I've got another 2 ready to go. So I'm going to stick that all together and let the glue go off, and then basically we'll see what we've got. So I'm just gluing in some extra bits and pieces to hold this in shape. So I've got another piece of polystyrene that runs the entire length of the boat underneath, and I'm basically attaching all of these pieces to that with some glue and some cardboard and some tape, just so that that holds the whole boat square while I put the other pieces of polystyrene on, which run for the length of the boat, and also I'll hold it all square while I do the fiberglassing. So I've just added these tabs in here, which are basically in each corner some cardboard tabs, which I've basically glued on with PVA, and I've also taped them on, same as the ones that attach it to the base, and I've done the same thing with every joint all the way along. There's basically cardboard glued and taped on. So now this whole boat is really quite rigid. I can pick the whole thing up to work on it and move it around. So now I just need to put the other lengthways struts on the missing two. Got one over there. And then we'll be ready for priming with PVA and fiberglassing. So here's the complete frame of the boat. I've now got these pieces on as well, which I've also put some tape on to stop them cracking because there's some quite tight bends in them, so that's just basically using the flex of the polystyrene. It's really quite rigid. Should be able to just turn this whole thing around, turn it up the correct way. So it looks pretty much like a boat. Obviously this piece will go once I've fiberglassed over the polystyrene. Similarly, these supports will be cut out of the middle section so there's actually somewhere to sit. So hopefully this frame will stand up in my shed. I'm pretty sure it will, and I'll be able to get it through the door hopefully as well. In the next video I'll be wrapping fiberglass around all of the polystyrene, having primed it with PVA first so that the polyester resin, which will be marine grade, doesn't melt through the polystyrene. That will give me a rigid box section, which the whole thing will be framed up in effectively box sections of fiberglass formed over the polystyrene, and from then I'll be skinning it. So check out for the next video. Have a look at my website xrobots.co.uk/boat. There'll be some pictures put on of this frame and the progress as I go.